Welcome to What's Left, a weekly political discussion challenging the mainstream left. I'm Eduardo Barca with co-hosts, teacher and socialist Andy Lipson, writer Jessica, community organizer and socialist Ken Cepeda. We are online at what-s-left.webno.com. You can find that link to our blog in the episode notes, as well as we encourage folks to please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications, and share your favorite episode wherever you found this episode. Thank you. All right. We are joined today by a previous guest of ours on What's Left. We're joined by Dheyanira, a mission local mom in San Francisco, California, and we will be discussing a topic about education, the perils of education, issues that are happening post, well, we're still in COVID times, but post the lockdowns since the reopening of schools. And we're hoping to discuss some of the issues specific to Dheyanira that has been happening across in many schools in the USA. And we're going to use it as to look at as a microcosm of a larger issue that's happening in many schools, especially in public education, post everything that we've been discussing around the privatization and public and private partnerships of education, online learning, and as well as all the issues around the COVID lockdowns. So anything else that I might have missed, Andy or Dea, that you want to add?
Maybe just that Tea's with Comité de las Madres Latinoamericanas.
Yes.
Yeah. And
thank you for
that's a group of mothers and families that she's been organizing with for several years now that are also being impacted by, and who came together out of the impact of the school closures on their students and all the Zoom and stuff like that. But I think that that she has a story to tell specifically about what's happening at her son's school at Everett Middle School that I think would be good to talk about as an example of what's happening in education.
Right. So should we begin there? Maybe that's a good place to start. Maybe Dea can you can fill us in on what's been happening in San Francisco Unified School District schools, and specifically to your school. That, again, like I said, it's sort of a reflection of what's been happening in other schools.
Sure. Thank you, Eduardo, and thank you all for inviting me. Well, it's a really sad story about what is happening at the school district, at the public school system here in San Francisco. And I think probably it's what is happening everywhere. But this situation is impacting even more to the immigrant community, to the brown and Black students, but in particularly here in the school where we are having our students, to the new immigrants, to the new Latino immigrants. Well, after the school closures, this is the year that our kids, especially the middle school kids and high school kids, went to the in-person learning, in-person school, after a year and a half of lockdown and being isolated and being on Zoom for their education. It's since the beginning of the year. I mean, our school, just to give you a little bit of context, the school where my son is going is here in the Mission District. It has 70% of the students Latino students. 44% of them are considered English learners. We have, I think, like maybe 10% of students, African American students, and another 10% white students, and then the rest of different races. So basically, it is a school for Latino students from the low-income community, immigrant community. is it was very at the beginning of the year. We all were excited. The kids were so excited because they were going back to school after a long time isolated. By that time, the kids were already suffering from the consequences of the impact of being isolated, alone, and a prolonged screen exposure. So when they got to the school, I mean, it was still the COVID restrictions in place. They did not allow parents in the building. Up until now, they do not allow parents in the building. So we really didn't know what's happening, how's everything inside the school. Everything that we knew about the incidents and everything that was happening was through the kids telling us what's going on, right? So of course they are coming to the school. They think this is the new school, especially for my son. He was transferring from elementary school to middle school during the pandemic. So this was basically a new everything for him. For them, this was a new experience at school. They do not have, things were happening from the beginning of the school year, fights, altercations, and he would tell me about that, especially in the classrooms. And it was really, really intense, to the point that teachers were resigning, were leaving. His PE teacher, his physical education teacher, I think he was terminated basically at the beginning of the year. This happened in September. But we didn't know, of course, that we have not informed of anything, and kids and parents were waiting to see when the teacher is going to come back. We just knew the teacher had taken some time off, but we were not informed about what was going on. Then the time was passing. My kid could tell me, no, we don't have a teacher, we don't have a PE teacher. We are being sent to split classes, and we're not doing anything. And then the same situation could happen with his elective for music, and he would come and tell me about fights inside the classroom, about the behavior of the kids. And I was like, this is not right. I mean, what I'm listening, what I'm hearing is this doesn't sound like a school, right? I mean, I was so surprised, and I'm not being able to be in the building. So by that time, that was on around November. So I started sending emails, and I started sending emails to the district, to the commissioners, to the Board of Education, going to the meetings and speaking, making comments and asking for help. By then, only the ex-commissioner Alison Collins would reply, and she actually came to the school and meet with us, and she helped us to facilitate connecting with the central office people. And we were able to have a meeting with them. This was around November. By then, this music teacher resigned, and she connected with me, and I was, kind of very involved, trying to help the teacher to bring resources and to help with, more music class, drum, circle. I wanted to get involved because my son is very into music, and he has been taking classes out of the system with privately. So he's really he has developed his music skills, right? But nothing could happen because the teacher resigned, and she had a conversation with me. When we had that conversation, she told me about everything that's happening inside the building. So I was aware of what was going on because of her. So then I even, I started even more my advocacy. I started reporting and getting these emails and getting connected with more moms that were having the same issues with other teachers. So we started having a group on WhatsApp, Everett MS group. And we were able to have a meeting with the central office people to trying to address these situations. But they did not. By November, we already identified that the problem was that the leadership, that the principal is not a right fit for us, not for a school. She doesn't speak Spanish. She doesn't understand our culture or our community. She's not meeting with the parents that have complaints. They go to meet with her, requesting to meet her, and she doesn't even. She was not attending the request from Latino parents. So we asked. That was our request back then in November, that we need to have a new leadership. That's not the right person for us. To the point that I, based on everything that happened, I said, I feel discriminated because she's not really paying attention to us and she's not listening to us. But I am noticing that she is working with the white parents and attending what they want, and just what it is, the system, right? So I started seeing the differences between what this set of students have, but not the other students, and especially mine that have not. He wasn't given any opportunity like other students, right? So we noticed during those meetings that the people at central office got really mad when we were requesting a change in leadership. So we realized that something is not right and something is going on at the central office, and they will not change the principal because there are strong connections right there. Then we talking with more moms, especially moms that have been at Everett School before, they could tell us that they didn't want that the principal is new, all those stories. So we knew that we are in front of something different there. We kept advocating for safety, for fixing the problems that we have, especially the communication. They could not let us to communicate between parents. We have not had a communication between parents and teachers. The administration could not talk to us and could not pay attention to us. So things were escalating because they were not fixing anything. And that's when we said this is intentional, because they are not doing what they had to do to fix these things, right? To address the safety problems, to let parents to get involved, even though we have been, I have been going to the school every day. There are a group of parents, Latino parents, that have been going every day to the school. And have been trying to bring programs, free programs. I have been advocating for more resources, outreaching organizations that were willing to help, but they could not let us bring the programs. So and then we started seeing that other schools are having this. Other parents at other schools, they were little by little having events, having the parents getting organized to be volunteers, to help the teachers. I mean, to help the school, not to help rebuild the communities, but they would not let us do that at our site. Then we realized that, of course, I realized this is something else. They really are doing this to dismantle the school. They want to, in my opinion, they want to close the school, and they basically want to leave our kids of color without education. And this is part of they were trying to do before, because when they closed the schools and they, the prolonged time, even though it wasn't necessary having the schools closed, it was basically the attempt to destroy the in-person education and to put the education on digital now on Zoom. So I saw this as as just another attempt to do that. They couldn't do it as a whole for everyone because the parents organized and fought for it, but they decided to do in a smaller scale, and of course starting with the schools where most students are people of color, brown and black students. If you don't provide the resources to the communities that were more impacted by the pandemic, of course you're going to have those problems, right? Of course you're going to have those challenges, and they didn't do it. And I asked them at the central office. I told them, you put it together, the newcomers, kids that do not have the language, kids that are bilingual, and then the kids from the English speaking community, and all together, right? And even the African American kids from different neighborhoods that everybody knows they do have issues, and not from now, but historically, I think. So of course you are putting all that together because it's intentional. You want to have an outcome out of this, which is the violence, if you are not providing the resources, the appropriate resources. On top of that, we have had the COVID as an excuse to oppress people because they have using that, not to be careful and to take care of the health of our students, but number one, to keep imposing the vaccine, and then the testing, because there's a business for them, and then no. On top of that, we don't have teachers. They have been not taking time off, and we understand some teachers, of course, are getting sick. Others are getting so overwhelmed. They cannot, we understand they cannot be working under these conditions, right? It's not safe for them to work under these conditions if they are just leaving these students just doing whatever they want without any consequences and control, not a structure, not anything, right? They were leaving. So we have like 10 teachers that have left. In my opinion, based on everything that I have seen, they have been creating the conditions to have violence at school. They knew what is the population and the problems that these communities have been facing. So what they did is just to let them with nothing, so the violence could explode. And that's happening with no teachers or substitutes that don't care about our students. They don't do anything. For the PE teacher, my son could tell me, I could ask him, what's the name of the teacher? I don't know. How you don't know? I don't know. He doesn't do anything. He just sit there, some side aside there, and he's not doing anything with us. So I don't know what is his name. I would have to be sending emails to the principal, to the assistant principals, because they do have so many people there. They have student advisors, they have counselors, they have social workers. I mean, they have so many people, and what they do, and we don't even know what they do, right? So I have to send an email to someone, to the point that I started going there to the office and saying, okay, what do you do? I mean, what's your role? I need to know what is your role so I can send an email, or I can communicate with someone that is telling me something, because I don't even know what's your role, right? And no one is answering anything, and the teachers would not answer. I mean, it was a mess, a total mess. And it's just based on my own experience working at the public system and the health system. I know that when there are many cookers in the kitchen, as they said, nothing gets done, and that was happening here. So I was advocating so hard, but we didn't have any response, to the point that we had just 2 days ago, a kid that was hospitalized with injuries, as the news said, life-threatening injuries. But this is intentional. This is totally intentional. And as I have said to some of the reporters that have been asking me, have been interviewing me, I said I could, it is hard to see that this is happening. This segregation system is still in place, and the oppression system under the leadership of an African American superintendent and a mayor, right? African American mayor here in San Francisco. It is sad, but that's the truth. And the Latinos are the ones that are being, targeted now.
I am curious, Dea, are you in contact with other parents whose kids were there prior to the pandemic?
One of those is Olga, part of the Comité, the Latina Moms Committee. Her kids are sixth graders, so they are, coming from Cesar Chavez, who is the feeder school. That's the only parent that we are together from before.
And I only asked that because I mentioned this earlier. I actually went to Everett Middle School myself as an immigrant kid, and I do, when I was reading this article, I don't recognize any of that. I definitely, there were problems, obviously, immigrant parents, there were some troubled kids. There was violence occasionally, but not to this level. And obviously I think you made reference to the conditions, right? Like, poverty and I don't know how many parents are really active, in terms of their kids' education, because I do know that, that makes a difference in my own life. My mother being very present and having the financial ability to be present and actually do what you do, talk to teachers and, ask questions and just be present, shows that, there's someone that cares about these kids. So I am curious about, your group and like what your sense is of other parents. How many parents are actually able to be involved in this? Is it like a minority, or, what's your sense of that?
I think because they have kept us divided, they don't let us to be together and communicate because of the same reason. We really don't know, but I know by the spring time, 30 kids left the school. So that tells you that parents are involved. They want to be, but we are not allowed, and we are divided because they don't let us, to be together. So I know that many parents have been going to the district to complain. I know the parents have been going to the office to yell at the secretary and the people that are there, asking for the principal. But she is in her office, is a walkie-talkie principal. She doesn't go out. She doesn't expose herself to this, right? She's just letting everything just to go down in the school, and the kids are the ones that are getting hurt. So I know that there are many parents, but we just haven't been able to be together. They really are controlling that much, and the sad thing is that sometimes I have to be using, because this is true, the system is privileging the white parents, the white kids, the white people in general, because it's a segregation system. But they are not the only ones who are getting, the benefits, and they are not the only ones who are discriminating against the immigrant, the Latino immigrants. We have the Chicano people. We have the Mexican Americans, or I don't know wherever they are, but the ones that are born here, that are doing this to us. Because that's true. We tend to say, and these people are also using that, always going against the white supremacy, white privilege, but they hate immigrants. They hate us. And that's something that no one is saying, right? But that's the truth. Chicanos hate immigrants, Latino immigrants. They are very discriminatory against us. And the problem that I see right now there at school, I saw it already before during when we were advocating for the reopening. The people from the unions, they are really the worst. And we have at that school, we have people that are involved in the unions for a long time. So that's what is happening there.
Question I had was just about your child's experience. I don't know, is he afraid to go to school? What's how much of this is he kind of aware of, or how does he describe daily life in this system?
He's not afraid. As I said, I think the kids that have been picked and the ones that are more impacted are the English learners, are the immigrant kids, the newcomers, because of the language barrier. They have been bullied. Kids make fun of them because they don't speak English very well. They tend to be more isolated and they are shy. So it's easy, right, for the bulliers to be attacking these kids. My kid, he has not suffered that. And I think, his dad and myself have been really there, I guess, teaching him some, life skills. He has many friends. He has a very large group of friends, and he really likes that. He was very, after being alone for so long, he had he could tell me, Mom, I have maybe we are 20 kids in my group, right? So because of that, I think he has not suffered that, and he's engaging, in they are playing basketball. At the beginning, whatever they did, it was fun, and it was, they were kind of getting entertaining themselves. But then he could tell me, it's very boring. We are not doing anything. He basically has been my guide. He could tell me, Mom, the substitute that came, he's not doing anything. He's just, basically standing up at the door, making sure that we are not going out, and we are going out. We want to go out, and we are telling, one of the students would tell the teacher, because he looks like Spider-Man, hey, Spider-Man, let us go out, things like that, right? I mean, they were just having that experience, and I go oh my God, what is this that he's telling me, no? And that's the reason why I have been advocating, because I would think this, if they don't do something, this is going to escalate, and this is not going to get, this is going to get ugly. And I could be advocating and could be going to the meetings asking for help. So in that sense, he could have a substitute, because sometimes he could get just split to other classes, and because the kids were brought to another class, the class was disrupted. Kids could get fights there because there are more kids. I mean, it was a mess, right? So in that sense, he was not with the kids that engage in fights. It's a big school. 70% of the kids are Latinos. So we had a small group of kids, African Americans, who would be fighting with among the African Americans, and the Latino kids, mostly the newcomers, that also would be fighting. These kids that are coming from, Central America, and the conditions that they are going through. But I was foreseeing that if we do not do something, this is going to escalate. And they were trying to push for a racial fights. They were trying to make this racial thing, and it is happening right now. It has not gone too far because of the moms, because me and the other moms that have been making noise, basically. And I could, in my emails, I could tell them, we are trying to prevent a tragedy. We don't want anyone to get killed. And I could said that to just last week to one of the commissioners that met with us. I said, because they are always saying everything takes time. We are waiting for the superintendent change. I mean, the new superintendent. I said, no, we cannot wait. You need to pay attention to this. What is going to happen if someone gets killed in the meantime, right? And just a week after that, we have a kid that was at the hospital. They have been trying to cover everything, and they have been trying to get to the end of the year. So, at the end of the year, that's it. Everything goes home and nothing happens. Everything gets fresher after the summer, and we go back again to the same BS, right? Yeah, that's what is happening, and it's sad because there are staff there that they don't care about the kids, and I know there are teachers that care and they want to teach, but there are other teachers that really we feel they don't care about the kids. They care just about their jobs. That's it.
Yeah, do you want to say anything about the media coverage? Because I know, like, in the letter that you sent around to us, you talked a little bit about that, but I think that might be helpful too, just in terms of public perception and how that might be colored by, like, the journalist who is covering the issue we're trying to.
Those I don't know, maybe you haven't been able to hear what other coverage news are out there right now. So basically that was last week and it caused some kind of controversy. But after the Monday incident that the kid had to go to the hospital, there are many other news that have been covering this. And I, just today, between yesterday and today, I have been interviewed by 3 or 4 different news channels. So, at this point, they have been trying to cover it. They have been trying to say that this is rumors, that is I don't know, who knows what they are saying, but they cannot cover it anymore. This is real, this is true, and this is part of the system that is completely broken. It's not working for us, and we cannot keep. We don't want that anymore. That's it. It's over. It's not working for us, and we don't want that anymore. We need to have a different system for us now because we cannot keep waiting any longer. Our kids have lost 2 years of learning. On top of that, they have been inflicted trauma by the negligence and the lack of action in the face of this violence incident. So that's it. And it seems I'm not alone. It's not happening only at Everett the school. It's happening at other schools. And little by little, moms are calling me and they are speaking up. Of course, they are very afraid. They are immigrants. Today, a mom called me and she was crying. She said, I know son, but he doesn't tell me. But I have seen he's coming with his things broken. Today, his cell phone was, is broken. I don't know what happened. Things like that are happening. And she said, I am afraid to go to the police to report this. And, it is against the immigrants. I mean, the school has been letting this situation to go that far. So within the school, this is creating an anti-immigrant sentiment, an anti-immigrant environment, because the kids are getting insulted, referring that they are immigrants. And this is not right. This is the policy of the school district, because that's how we are get treated, and anywhere you go in the system. At less degree, not that crude and cruel like what is happening here right now, but that's the way we are treated by the system, because it's a segregation system, and this needs to change. because it's not working anymore.
My last job, I worked with a kid that was still in high school, and he's also a kid with a mother that's very involved in his education, and to the degree that she's modified her job, to be able to be present at school. And so this kid had a number of incidents of violence against him. And the kid confessed to me that, he, at first, when he came back from the COVID lockdowns, they were nervous, then they became, at ease, and then violence, started erupting. And so the kid could not wait to be out of high school. He was a senior in high school, and he told me multiple times that he did not feel safe. There was a time, and so I guess the point that I'm trying to make and ask is, what relationship do you see, with like this violence in the lockdowns, and this isolation that you speak of? Like, do you see, how do you see that relationship?
Of course, our kids are traumatized, and the mental and emotional health uh, has been impacted. Not only the kids' emotional and mental health, we all are impacted. We all have mental and emotional problems because of the lockdown. So we when we talk to the moms, we know that the teachers are sick. We know that the adults are sick, but the denial and trying to come back after a pandemic and after the lockdown and everything that happened, and keep doing the same thing that the system was doing before the pandemic, that's the problem. That's the issue, right? Because they are like, okay, they are back, and they are gonna pick everything up from 1.5 years, and not thinking and considering about the mental and emotional health, and especially for these kids, the most impacted, Black and African and Latinos. That's the problem. So the problem is the adults. The problem is the system, and the system are made of people. And we still are trying to conform. We are still trying to maintain the status quo because we are trying to maintain our jobs. We are not thinking about our kids. The system, of course, is gonna they want to maintain that system, and they are doing everything they can to maintain the segregation system and basically the corruption, because it's so corrupted. The district the system is completely rotten. It's so corrupted. I don't know what else to say. It's just that we are the problem. We as a society are the problem, because we are not seeing the kids as part of our society and protecting them, right? People who don't have kids don't get involved. They don't care. And that's it. It's not happening to them. So it's the capitalistic society that we live in, that we don't care about the other. It's so individualistic that you don't even care about the other kids. You just care about your kid. And this is something that I think they are maybe so mad, and they don't understand, because here you have this mom that the kid is not suffering from that. Yes, my kid is not being given the opportunity to practice sports. He's not being given the opportunity to go to field trips. He is not given the opportunity to go to the mission science workshop. I mean, basically they are excluding my kid from all of that. He really doesn't care, because he said, I mean, that's boring anyway. But that's exclusion, and they are doing this in retaliation of me advocating for the reopening, and now advocating for this and exposing what is happening there, right? And they don't understand. I guess they don't understand why I have to be doing this when my own kid is not being affected by, is not being hurt. But I cannot think other way, and that's the reason why I'm so grateful that I'm not from here. I'm from another place. I'm from outside, because I have that collective way of thinking that I want to have the environment, not only my kid being safe, but the environment where he is safe and everybody is safe. So they all can, they can have a community where everybody is safe, the teachers, the staff, the kids, the parents, not just my kid, right? That's what is happening at that school. The white kids are safe. The school has double standard. As long as the white kids are fine, the parents don't complain, the white parents don't complain, then it's fine. Nothing happens. Because if a white kid gets hurt, then, everybody knows what's going to happen at the district, right? You cannot have a white parent complaining, because that can be, they don't want that. As long as they are okay, and those parents don't complain, because they don't complain, they are fine. The rest, they just can go to hell. And that's not right. That's not right. That's not the way of thinking of Latino community. The parents that are fighting, the parents that are advocating, the moms who are advocating, not all of them, but the ones that are advocating, we are doing it because we want to have all our kids safe and all our kids having the education they deserve. What they did to us right now, on top of the problems during the pandemic, now we have this trauma of, in-person school with violence and fights and not teachers. I mean, basically, it's a mess. It's a mess, and our kids are getting are paying for the consequences of that, and it's not right.
Well, one thing I would say that you said, Dea, was that when they came back to school, like it was back to as business as usual, and I don't think that's what happened. When they came back, everyone had to wear masks. When they came back, teachers had to get COVID-19 tested, and students were going to be contact traced. If somebody got COVID, then we were going to see who might be near them who had COVID, who had to be quarantined. When they came back, a bunch of students were quarantined. When students came into the building, and I'm speaking from the experience because I really do agree with what Dea is saying, that Everett is being destroyed. But in my opinion, the destruction that I'm seeing of Everett, it looks similar to what I saw and am hearing is happening now at a slower rate at Mission. And then when I talk to Brian, who says that he works for somebody whose Catholic school, parochial school, is disintegrating, I start to go, I see that this is not because I don't think this is an immigrant thing. Although I do believe, like we said, that this system, which is collapsing around its ears, I believe intentionally, is going to fall on the heads of Black and brown kids first. Mm-hmm. We said that last year when we said the effect was going to be, and that's what we're seeing here. And white kids might think they're getting over, white parents might think they're getting over, but their system is being tanked just as well. And they're going to face what they're facing the music already, and it's going to get worse for them as well. But the thing that I really do believe, my experience at Mission while I was there was I saw how much I do believe the teachers who came back love the kids. And they would say they did all that whole thing, that whole year of remote, because they love the kids. I would say that was a backwards love, or rather that's the best I can call it, because what they did was intensely harmful and broke the notion of solidarity between teachers and parents, because teachers were essentially saying, I'm going to abandon you to keep myself safe, theoretically keep myself safe, and you just do what you have to do because I'm not going to be near your kid. No, regardless of what kind of damage it might make for that child, and regardless of the damage it was going to make, because the kids wouldn't be around each other. We're going to sacrifice a whole year in the name of we're helping you. And I get it. I get it when the Spanish conquistadors came in and said, we're bringing you religion, how they said we were doing this to save your soul, but slaughter was the result. And so that's how I see this. But the teachers who came in Mission, who I do believe love the kids, you could smell the fear on them. You could smell the fear they had in relationship to having those kids in the classroom. And you would hear some of them say, these kids aren't masking. The one keeps putting his mask down. That's the thing that was. And so with that fabric, the only thing that was holding public education or institutional education together was some of the relationships that were formed between teachers and parents and teachers and students. That's the only thing that was holding it together. And that got stretched apart during that last year. And when students became excited about coming back together, they saw that it wasn't coming. It was ripped apart. And so those relationships were torn apart. And as you said, that the act of keeping us all divided has produced this result, which I do believe is, what did they say remember in the beginning of the lockdowns, they said, guess what? We have these online schools. We don't have any school shooter incidents anymore. Maybe these online schools are going to work. No. Well, now what have they done? They've essentially so destroyed the fabric, made fear such a part of institutional education, whether it's public or even in some cases private or charter, that now schools are violent, are even more violent than they were before because of this fear and erosion of relationships that has taken place, and the fact that people are just being contact traced and kicked out or taken out because they have COVID, or taken out because they were near next to somebody and you're away for a week. It's like you're in, you're out. It's complete dystopian control system. And yes. and yet we're told this, we're doing this for your safety, and we're doing this for our safety. Teachers supporting it. Teachers saying that the biggest thing we need is PPE, health and safety equipment, of insulators, and we need N95 masks. Are you kidding me? Do you think that's what we need after a year of remote? Like, and so those are the discussions teachers were having. And even now, the UESF's discussion is like, when is our paycheck getting in? Like, is it coming in at the right time? Our union is fighting to get paycheck protection and to get you COVID relief time. And it's like, your system is being destroyed from inside, you idiots. Yes. And the one allies you have, you're not even listening to, and you don't care what they have to say. And you're telling them that, oh, we believe in hope. And you're just trying to you're trying to make it seem like our schools are bad. They're actually accusing Dea and people like that of almost racism, because they're saying how unsafe the schools are. And it's basically saying, acknowledge the damage you've done and let's deal with it. And let's stop making this about fear. Now, I think it's too late. I think teachers have so bought in to this COVID narrative that it's a wrap. So I don't think there is a way of undoing what it is. But I do believe, Dea, what you're doing is being there and speaking out is right. I just don't think there's a way, because this ship is not just being run. While I do think it's being run by the World Economic Forum and the institutions are trying to push that, at this point, the unions and teachers are behind every one of these things. They're also pushing, even if they don't even know they're doing it. But their fear, their health focus, their vaccine insanity, with basically thinking they're going to vax all these kids, has driven our schools to this point where they are being disintegrated from inside. And I think it's done intentionally. And I think we as teachers are been dupes in this. And now we're just being dumb facilitators of destroying an education system that before it had all sorts of problems like it is. But like Kenny said, it is now accelerating. And I do think they're trying to destroy brick and mortar schools, and it's going to be worse for immigrant kids first, and it's going to get bad for the rest of us later.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, I mean, there are several things I think about, because I've been, obviously, I was a public school student. I was also an educator in the school district. I supported different schools, and I also fostered a child a former student of mine that went and attended elementary, middle, and then high school, and then I had him go to a private school, for different reasons. So I think my experience, just having volunteered at the middle schools and high schools, having interpreted at high school level for other students, and having been my own experience, just gives me insight, and just having the thoughts that I'm going to share, because I echo some of the things that you already both have said, and that obviously schools and institutions, that the public education is obviously a broken system. It has been before the pandemic, and it continues to be, obviously. And as we have seen, many studies show that schools to prison pipelines, this is what that is, because it's all about Pavlov learning, right? You have to be conditioned in order to do certain things so that you can be a better worker. And if you don't fit the standard, if you just don't fit the standard, then you are then moved onto a more disciplinary education, which that disciplinary education eventually leads you to, well, you're not part of the society, you're going to go to prison instead, because you can't do exactly what we're asking you to do. So all these other people go here, and you workers be workers, right? And if you can't fit, then you either get lost in the system or you just go to prison. No? So it's funneling out these students, which tend to be Black and brown, not because I think that it's just poverty. It's schools are competition. That's what it is. It's a sports game. Schools tend to be, it used to be more about SATs and ACTs and all of that, no? And so you have a bunch of competitive nature. The objective is, after 12 years of schooling, is to go to university, and university is to get a job and to get a career. That is the entire focus of public education and private school as well, because it's just the entire focus of the entire system that we live in. So obviously, then you have all these Black and brown students who can't compete with people who have higher resources, and so they get into these disability or disabled or special education programs, which are basically just ways to get these children labeled, because you can't deal with multiple intelligences, because we're obviously different. Everyone's different. I don't think we all learn standardized in a standardized way, right? I'm very good with linguistics, and I'm very good, but I'm not very good with mathematics. I mean, that's just my nature. And my family is really good. My mother, for example, is really great with maths. She does maths really well, but then she struggles with art because it's too abstract, and it's not for her. And so we have and some people learn kinesthetically. They learn physically. Like my friend Jake, he learns physically. Like he has to learn through his experience. He can't just learn it through a lecture. And so we all learn differently, and that's not the nature of school. So you have people labeling these students as troubled, defiant, you are bad, or and then we have all these labels, and then they follow them. And then teachers this, Andy, because I used to help teachers write these things up. There's a CUME folder, and every teacher at the end of the school year is supposed to write down your notes, and then the following teacher reads those notes. So then you are influenced by what those notes are following you your entire life in school. And so you end up being labeled this way forever, unless a teacher decides they don't want to read that, obviously. But that's hard because you're going to be influenced by what people say. So anyhow, I just think there's a lot of abuse and neglect that was already there, and it was exacerbated by the pandemia. And as we've already had in an episode previous that I shared, my biggest my anger was, I still have this este rencor fuerte que tengo adentro de mí, inside me, that I have against my former colleagues. And it's that they know this. And so what we were doing in schools was we were just creating, I think for some of us, at least from my point of view, I wasn't trying to educate students so that they can be competitive. I was trying to make sure I held their humanity in schools. That was what I was doing. And that's why I didn't want to be a full-time classroom teacher. I just wanted to be a supportive educational component to schools, because I wanted to hold on to this humanity. That was my goal in schools, is to make sure that they held on to the arts, the humanities, to hold on to their emotional, social well-being, and get them to resources. But then, so when you work in a school, I would tell people, if you can't, working in a public school is like working in a hospital. It's always, you gotta hit the ground and run. You can't just focus on maths, or you can't just focus on language, or it's going to be more than that. You're a social worker, you're a parent, you're a mentor, you're all these things. I mean, Andy, you have mentored many students, and those relationships are built. That's what the foundation of our schools are. Well, not the schools and the institution, but for teachers who have that love and hope, and I hope they want to do that. But you go offline, you go online, and then those relationships, as you have said, and and Dea has also alluded to it, they're just destroyed because the distance. How are you supposed to have that connection? And then we wonder why kids are dying of suicide, right? Because it's been, as I have just a little statistic here, that I want to just say, suicide is the second leading cause of death. It's not COVID. It's not COVID. Suicide is the second leading cause of death among people aged 15 to 24 in the USA. Nearly 20% of high school students report serious thoughts of suicide, and 9% have made an attempt to take their lives, according to the National Alliance of Mental Illness. It's not COVID. It's not COVID. And in San Francisco, people did not die from COVID as the number one cause of death. It was overdosing. And I know former students who have died from overdosing. And these things are picked up by your people, adults that are caring people in your school, such as your social workers, your counselors, your teachers, who play all these different hats. And if you're caring enough, you're going to do what you're going to be seeing these signs. But then teachers, I don't know what got into their head. Se les metió la chiripiorca. I don't know what happened to them, but they decided to go on and then wondering, you know, why students are acting the way they are right now. It's because, I'm sorry to say, if you promoted locking down schools, you're part of that issue. I'm just going to say it that way. Whoever watches this, if teachers decide to watch this, you were a contribution to the way our students are now. You are part of that. And I know all of my friends who wanted to lock down schools and even considered locking down schools during the winter of 2001, 2022, who wanted to lock down for the rest of this school year. They're also a contribution to that. So they have to be responsible for that. And they will never, as I said it before, they will never admit that they were wrong. That when they said, do you remember, Dea? They said Latinos and Black students do not want to go back to schools. That was false. They got it wrong. And they kept saying it all over Facebook. There's a bunch of videos all over. Chicago teachers said it. You know, San Francisco teachers said it. Oakland teachers said it. Fresno teachers said it. High populations of children of color were in hubs or alternative schoolings because, or city provided centers that were led by non-teachers. I mean, teachers, people who did not have a background in education, who basically just got fingerprinted and made sure they weren't criminals and they didn't know what to do in the midst of all of this. And who were going there? Here in San Francisco in the hubs, high percentage. Number one, Latinos. Number two, Blacks, and all other races after that. I don't know where San Francisco teachers, I'll speak to them because I know the statistics here. I don't know where teachers thought Latino students did not want to go back. You organized Latino families. I organized Latino families. We went to churches. Kenny worked with organizations. He knew of families that wanted to go back. Yes, there were some students who didn't want to go back. Yes, there were some families who didn't want to go back. I acknowledge all of that, but there were this much, the minority. The majority of us wanted to go back, and teachers lied. That's what they did. That's all they did. They lied, and they said we didn't want to go back. So that's wrong, and they will never admit it. The union, the people who are my friends who are working in the union, who were recently elected last year, lied. They lied. The vice president lied. He's Latino himself. Frank Lara, I'm sorry, but you're a politician now, so I'm just going to say your name. I wouldn't say your name if you weren't a politician, but you lied. You're the vice president of the union, and you said Latino families did not want to go back to schools. You lied. If the San Francisco Unified School District put out a survey before the reopening of schools, what did the survey show? High percentage of Latino students wanted to go back. High percentage of African-American students wanted to go back. No matter what you said out in the media, you were wrong. And that's it. You were just wrong. And you'll never admit to it. You just never admit to it. And now we're having the second leading cause of death among people are 15 to 24. A contribution to that have been teachers, and you have to accept it. I don't think they'll ever acknowledge it, and they'll probably attack me some more. They'll think I'm anti-teacher, anti-union, whatever, la 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 la. They'll always say that. And then we have, according to the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, between April and October 2020, hospital emergency departments saw a rise in the share of total visits that were from kids for mental health needs. I don't know what people thought about locking down schools. So when we're talking about what's happening at Everett, coming back to this topic, talking about Everett, talking about Mission High School, talking about Cesar Chavez Elementary School, talking about Leonard R. Flynn Elementary School, talking about Bryant Elementary School. These are schools in my mission, in my neighborhood, my community, talking about all the public schools that have high number of incidents like this. It's because students are trying to readjust to a system that it wasn't actually meant for them to begin with, and it's not going to be for them forever. And now they're wondering what's, the issues, because we closed down the community centers, we closed down the libraries, we closed down the wellness centers, we closed down the recreational parks and rec, we closed down structures in parks, outdoors. Do you remember that? We closed down structures in parks and parks. We closed down, we told everyone to stay home. And then people were online, and if anyone remembers Andy's episodes, what were the students doing when they showed up on your online class? Did you see them? Boxes and boxes of black screens because no one showed up. showing their face. Of course not. I know. I just went on Saturday to a theater piece for a student of my former colleague, their daughter, and they had their mask on, not because of COVID. They wanted to hide. They wanted to not show themselves. They're not dealing with themselves. They're not able to deal with the environment, the real environment. They have to go online and be on their phones. No, so I think that that's what's happening now. If people are not using, kids are not using masks for COVID, they're using it for covering because they're not dealing with their insecurities, you know, and it's hard. I understand insecurities are hard, but you have to confront if you have braces or glasses or this, or you look this way, or whatever. Those are part of life in society. Dea, you mentioned about this hate from teachers. I don't experience the same thing that you experience. Obviously, you have your own experience, and I want to honor what you've experienced. I'm not saying that you're wrong. I don't think that you're wrong. I believe you when you say that because I know you've worked and you've volunteered a lot in your child's school. For me, from being on the other side of not family, just working in schools, I think what I noticed was teachers sort of have this kind of air of pretentiousness or the status of knowing it all, or being sort of patronizing, condescending. And if you are a parent that doesn't have your vocabulary, or you don't know the ins and outs, or you're the kind of parent that sort of holds down 3 jobs or 2 jobs, or you speak Spanish as your first language and you're struggling like my mother did in English, or, you know, and accents do, accents do change the way that you listen to someone. There's like lots of studies that people do actually discriminate just by listening to people's voices. Yeah, you're going to discriminate. You're going to be patronizing. You're going to think you're big boss or whatever, and you're going to just put down people. I know this because I see it all the time. My child goes to a mission elementary school, and if I go versus another parent goes, I know what happens behind closed doors. I say, hold on, my child doesn't have to take this test. Or my nephew, and it's not my biological, it's my biological child, but not my son. My nephew doesn't have to take this test. Or my nephew is saying, you know, he was sat at the bench. How long was he sat in the bench? You know, there's a policy for this or whatever. Or, you know, when you start talking in this language, teachers are sort of like, oh, you know something. Suddenly the emails start going, and then you're the only parent noticing all this. Like, I help my brother out with the emails, and then they're just getting all these emails and start freaking out. But if you're not in the emails, if you're not at the school, and it was for many schools, and I suspect that what many Latino families had wasn't the emails. What they had was going physically in the school and talking about these things. They may not have had the language, they may not have had the knowledge, they may not know about what the educational things to do, but familias would be at the school and they would observe, they would see, they would look, and then they would say, hold on, maestra, hold on, I don't know if that my child, and that's what would happen. That's what they would do. They don't have access to that because no one lets them in anymore. So obviously their child goes in, they have no idea what's going on. And how are you supposed to learn if you can't volunteer, if you're discriminating against the vaccinated, the unvaccinated, because you can't volunteer anymore if you're not vaccinated? So what can you do? How do our families thrive? Our families are not going to thrive with just the little emails. You have to make sure. I'm okay with, I even get overwhelmed with the emails, but I'm okay with the school emails. I'll get to that. But most of our familias are not like that. They're not going to be emailing you like you write letters there. How many of nuestras familias write letters? They don't. But when they're in the schools, they're seeing and they're like, hold on, I have a question about that, you know, and they're not having access to any of that. Mm-hmm. And if they see a student bully another, I don't use the word bully, but I'll just use the term for because conventional sake. But if they see a student bullying another student, they'll speak up for their children, you know, or they'll say something, or they say, you know, I don't know about that student, maestra, or this, or that happened, or my child's not telling me, but I saw this, or, you know, or whatever, they're in the, or whatever, they're just more informed, but none of this is happening anymore. And again, this is all because of people's beliefs that COVID is the issue. And I should mention here, not a single child has died of COVID in San Francisco. So I don't know why we're still having these precautions. And teachers are going out. I know this because, of course, I go out and I see them. Teachers are going out and they're taking off their masks, but they want masks in schools, right? Because we're afraid of our students. So it's all of the cognitive dissonance and all of the conflict. It doesn't make any sense. I don't know what happened to teachers after COVID. I think it's a bunch of reasons. That some of it is Trump deranged syndrome. So other of it is, just the belief that they rely more on the tech, and they believe that's the way, that's the path. So it could be many things, but I'll just say that I'm just kind of getting it off there, because anyone can disagree if you want.
No, you are right. You are right.
Preach, brother.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think it's so important that we never lose sight of that fact that the people in power, including school administrations and including teachers unions, knowingly condemned young people like all over this country and the world to poverty, to anxiety, depression, drug overdose, physical issues, mental health issues, like knowingly, because we had that information before. It wasn't like, oh, whoops, and now they're not gonna admit that they were wrong. Like we knew what we were doing. I'm having a thought. I'm having a connection related to the point that well, Eduardo, you just kind of touched on at the end there, but then also earlier you were talking about parents being banned from the schools, like physically banned during the lockdowns. And I'm making a connection, and you guys can tell me, I don't know, I haven't thought this one through, but I was just, thinking about this phenomenon of like being cut off from your child's experience, right? Like their teachers, like the access that you were just describing, Eduardo, parent-teacher conferences, like volunteer programs, right? PTA, whatever, like just being completely cut off from your child's like daily environment that they're in for whatever, 8+ hours a day. And like whether, even if you do like believe the alleged justification of like, oh, it was for public health, which none of us here believe that. But, I think even if you do, it's that like severing to me is kind of reflective of a larger phenomenon in terms of sort of, I don't know, like when we put it in the context of the whole like Fourth Industrial Revolution program, right? Like targeting the youth, targeting children, stripping them of every protection that they have, and what's like the primary protection that most children have in any context, right? It's their parents, especially their mothers. And then kind of like molding them, to fit a system and serve a system that is like not designed to make them happy or make them healthy, right? It's designed to just enslave everybody. And I don't know, my mind's just going, I'm thinking about like, usually on average, like more right-wing white parents, in other parts of the country, and the way, like the debates that are going on in terms of like kind of between teachers and parents, or I guess like school institutions and parents in terms of curriculum, and like the disalignment between different cultural ideologies that are being pushed in schools, right? Like I'm thinking of the Florida bill, and the way, I mean, the media framed it, especially in terms of like, sex ed and gender and stuff. And that was part of it. But like a lot of that bill, if you actually look at the bill, it's most of it is actually to do with like privacy and parental rights to know what's going on with your kid at school. And so I'm just seeing like a connection here in terms of like whether it's testing kids for COVID without consent from parents, which has happened repeatedly in different areas, putting them in isolation without the parents even knowing, right? Like in the middle of the school day, just like, whoop, take them out of class because they're contagious or they're whatever. Or like the more, what tends to be the more like right-wing framing, which is more like of the identity-based stuff, or whether it's like therapy files, yeah, and just I don't know, just like this whole pattern of breaking families. And I think a lot of people would hear your story, Dea, and be like, well, why don't you just pull your kid out of school? Like, obviously it's a toxic environment, but I think, they're missing your point about, no, like, I'm not just fighting for my kid, I'm fighting for all of the kids, right? Because not everybody can just pull their kid out.
Yeah.
And I think there's so much class solidarity at the top, like, as always, right? But the fragmenting, and the way that, like, even in your instance where like you were able to mobilize some parents and try to push back, like, I'm just imagining, like, well, what if parents could do that, and also across political lines. That's kind of where my mind was going in terms of drawing that connection, is not necessarily to like equate the two, but I think there's something like, there's an underlying tension there that I'm like, well, gosh, if we had that kind of solidarity, right? Like, maybe we could push back.
Yep.
I don't know. And a lot of this is, I don't know, because I teach university, like, I'm pretty insulated from dealing with parents at all. Like, part of why I originally wanted to teach university. I'm like, I don't have to deal with that. But I don't know. Does that make sense? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, totally. Yes. And it's exactly what you said. That's what they are doing. They are trying to separate the kid from especially the mothers, right? The parents, and conditioning them and isolating them and damage them, because that's what they have done. They did that when they came with the residential schools with the indigenous people. I mean, those are the same practices. This is exactly what they are doing. It's exactly the same thing, because it's the same pattern that they have been using, and they know that it works to crash people and to destroy communities. That's what they did with the African Americans, and that's what they are doing. They are trying to do with us. What I'm saying right now is that it was very interesting when we did have the meeting with the people at the central office, when I said, you put these communities together and you didn't have the resources for them, you didn't have a plan for this. When you put newcomers, bilingual kids, and the only English speaking only kids together, and among them African Americans, and all together in one place with one teacher, how the teacher is gonna be able to, no one is gonna be able to teach these kids if it doesn't have support, doesn't have other people working with other kids that do not speak English and don't have training for this. It's not easy, it's very complex, and it needs to have a specialized preparation and help, and they didn't do that. So I told them, and when he said the supervisor of the middle schools, he said, oh, we did have a plan, but it didn't work. Of course, what didn't work for them is that they didn't plan that moms are going to be advocating and are going to be on top of them, asking for a safety plan, asking for it to correct these things. They didn't have that plan. That's what they didn't work for them. They didn't work. It didn't work for them that I'm going to be speaking up, and when they were trying to keep me silent, I could go around, and now I am in the media, right? They didn't plan that. That's the plan that they didn't have, because they were trying to have the escalation of violence just right at the beginning of this. By November, by December, they wanted to have something awful happening, so they can say, oh, we have to close the school because the violence is so bad that we need to close the schools. That was happening. So yes, they are doing and they are applying the same thing because they know it works. Just crashing the communities, but they don't know about solidarity, and that's what I'm trying to do, to build this communities and solidarity to the people and among us, because that's the only thing that's going to help us. That's the only thing that's going to save us all, right? So hopefully we can have, more and more parents are coming and they are showing support, and that's my hope, because many of them don't know. I have been fighting not this, but I have been fighting also against the vaccination, against the testing. I had to put in, underline this. I did send that was by January or February. I did send a do not consent letter, and that was a letter because I am not vaccinated and I am connected with freedom people, and I have been going to workshop with lawyers to learn how to protect our kids. So I did send a letter, a do not consent letter, because they were about to have my kid to perform the testing to my kid without telling me. And they called me just before they did, and I said, I do not consent. Do not do it, because I do not consent. So I do have a letter that is very well written, legally written, to them, and I sign it and I send it, so they know that if they touch my kid, they could face a legal consequence. That's what they are going, targeting me and targeting my kid. But they were doing this they are doing this to all the families, and they don't know. And I'm not being able to help them right now, because I have been fighting for myself. I was terminated for my job because of no vaccination policy, because I didn't comply. I'm fighting for my kid, trying to keep him not vaccinated, going to in person, because the most important thing for him was to be with friends. So he could say, I want to be with my friends. I want to go to school because I want to be with my friends. The school is, here's the language, but he said, school is shit, but I want to be with my friends. I'm not learning anything. It's very boring. Okay, that's basically wherever you go, the schools are like that. But he wants to be with his friends, and he's having an experience because the school composition is mostly Latino. What I see there, most of the kids are fine. It would be better. Sorry, it would be better if we do have all the programs to help them, but they are fine. As long as they are together, they are fine. That's what we are fighting for, to have the kids in a safe environment and healthy environment, right? So he's basically having the experience at school, just making fun of with the kids. Just for example, I'm going to give you an example. They skip the PE classes because they are not doing anything, and they go around the school to explore the school because they don't know, right? So they found a room full of a lot of things, and among them, among those things, they did have water balloons. So they started filling up the balloons and then just throwing the balloons, and they were throwing to the floor, so they can make the teachers that are going after them to make them fall. So like they are having fun, right? Those are the kind of things that we did. Because the Latino are kind of more like that. That couldn't happen with a bit in a school with Chinese students or white students. That couldn't happen there, right? So I'm just trying to save those experiences because that's positive for him. They are doing their own positive experiences, but they need to have structure. They need to be teach, and they are not. They need to be taught. So that's why we are fighting. That's why we are fighting. So I'm keeping him because he is with Latino people. He is with the Latino community, and that's important for me. Because I am coming from a school with more white and affluent community, more white and affluent people, and I really didn't like it.
There's just so you were saying that they didn't have a plan, right, for coming back and like making sure the kids would be taken care of, their emotional, mental health. And in the show, we've talked extensively about the fourth industrial revolution, technology, in the role that is scamming down, and the role it has in capitalism. And so I also hear, when we started this episode, you talked about the walkie-talkie principle, right? You talked about the breaking down of, the social bonds, the isolation. We talked about what they did to Native American people, right? To break the social bonds. It all reminds me of mass incarceration.
Yep.
We've talked about it, right? Like, and it reminds me of what's happening at the border, right, with immigrants, undocumented immigrants. And so, what I guess I want to say is, and want to see what you think about it. It's like they didn't have a plan to bring us together, but they do have a plan to make the most vulnerable first wards of the state. And I think technology is going to have a role in that. And so I kind of want to gather your thoughts on that. And what do you make of that?
Yes, that's what it is. That's what it is. They just want the kind of the next prisoners. I mean, they are creating, the people that are going to go to the prison, because that's the business for them. And it's the schools are the fabric for that. Basically, that's what I'm seeing, and I have told to everyone, even to the principal and to the board of education and everybody. I have said this. When I see the kids during the recess, I told them that resembles like a jail. Like you are creating this, you are conditioning these kids to what is going to be next, to the jail for them. And that's what I'm fighting for, because it's just, this is not right. I mean, they are doing this to my kid. They are doing this to my kids' classmates. This is what they are doing to us, to the community. And I have said to the people that are interviewing me, this is the reason why only the 2% of the Latino people get to the university and are professionals, even though we are a big community, because of the system. The system is is creating this, and this needs to change. This needs to change. We cannot continue like that. We need to fight for that. This is the reason why our kids are not getting education. Our young people or Latino young people are not getting to the university, are not advancing in their careers or being professional, because the system is not educating our kids. It's segregation system. This is the segregation, and they have it very in place. They have a very good system in place, because it's the same system that was made by whites for whites and privileged.
Well, I was just going to add that, we've been, it's unfortunate there that you are sharing with us that you are not able to retain your job because of your medical status regarding your vaccine. And says it's unfortunate that lots of people are losing their jobs, and the Latino community is one of the highest communities. I don't know about Black community at this moment, but I haven't read about it. But I know the Latino community is one of the most skeptical communities around the vaccines in Latin America and in the USA. And so I wanted to talk just for a bit, if that's okay, if we can just steer that way, because it's something that's affected students. And I know that lots of families where I'm at in my school have discussed with me privately that the pressures and why they got their children vaccinated. They felt very pressured by the campaigns, the very aggressive campaigns to pressure families into vaccinating their children, and giving only one side and not giving a full, like, okay, here, like, they're supposed to give schools are supposed to be a sort of neutral place, and you're supposed to give, but it's not sort of what you decide on your own, but they didn't. So I'm sure that about families as well that have felt the pressure, that have felt the or have had vaccinations because they're under duress, or their children, they don't want to feel left out, so they have to. They're the ones who are also saying, you know what, just vaccinate me, and that for me is something that I have seen in the Mission District, and it's very unfortunate. And here we are during this week of conversations of Roe versus Wade about pro-choice and bodily autonomy, and just to make the connection to current events, how are the liberals and progressives talking about bodily autonomy, talking about pro-choice, my body, my choice, and then stupidly saying, obligate people to take things that are not part of your choice, and that you're just going to ask people to exclude them from society and to inject them through pressure campaigns against their will or under duress, right?
Yeah.
So I don't see how, it doesn't make any sense. And so it's also just conflicting the messaging to our children in schools when you're telling them, because I know San Francisco, Oakland, all of the area are mostly liberals and progressives that are teaching these schools, and they're talking about bodily autonomy at the same time telling you, and make sure you get vaccinated. Don't forget to get to your families, or you don't have to talk to, like, it's so, it doesn't match what, it doesn't, there's no consistency there. And
Yeah,
so
that's the hypocrisy. That's
no?
what people, that's
Yeah.
the hypocrisy. That's what families are from the Latino community are realizing, are opening their eyes and seeing that that's the hypocrisy. And that's it. There's no, that progressiveness, now we see the real face of the liberals and the progressives. That's what it is. Now we
Kenny,
see.
you were going to, yeah.
No, yeah, I just wanted to add specifically to the mission, in San Francisco, the same community that this school, right, Everett Middle School belongs to. A lot of community organizers are themselves part of this campaign to pressure people and to also force people to basically get vaccines without full consent, without full knowledge of these vaccines. I myself have been ostracized, and completely cut off from the organizing circles in part because of my stance on the vaccine, because I'm not to be touched, and so these people like Calle 24, that nonprofit, the ones pushing this madness, even though, in the mission, it's same community, a lot of businesses were not enforcing the vaccine. A lot of Latino businesses were not. I was going to concerts, mass gatherings, of people, Latino people, undermining these things, and we stayed quiet because we didn't want clampdowns, on this. So there is, in fact, a lot of resistance, hesitancy, and like you said, Eduardo, skepticism around this vaccine that was being played in the background by the people that are quote unquote uneducated, by the people that are educated in nonprofits, were the ones pushing this bullshit. Just like you're mad at teachers, I'm mad at organizers that are part of creating this prison for our kids. Are part of creating this coercion in this mess. That again, I think the school is a microcosm of the society as a whole. Our community as a whole. They not only did they stop kids from going to school and socializing and keeping those social bonds, they also stopped things like the carnaval, right? They stopped a lot of social activities that held the social fabric of this society. So I don't know. I think we're still going to see the aftermath of all this. But again, I hold the people responsible, the people that say they're about people, the people that say they're about community,
they are not.
They say they're about freedom, those people I hold responsible for this. Just like you're mad at teachers, I'm mad at organizers, and I don't care if they don't talk to me now, but, like, it's just like, even if they were wrong before, it's time to get it right. It's time to see what the hell has happening. It's time to see what the hell is coming down, the pipe, because this is just the beginning of a fight. Just like, they are fighting multiple fronts. This is not just about a vaccine. Like in their story will tell you that. This is not just about vaccine. This is about the future of society. This is about capitalism. This is about, corporations. This is about corruption in institutions, in unions, in city politics, and so it's bigger than the vaccine. Like this fight doesn't end here. If anything, this is the beginning. Even if we're not getting, pressure publicly, there is still pressure. There's still people paying the price for not, adhering to the mandates. There's still people like they are getting, ostracized, and whose lives have been turned upside down. People like Lipson, who had to move up, outside of Mission High School, from the same community again. And so I'm talking to the community people, the people who claim that are about community. you are losing important people. You are losing people who are consistent, about the values, people who will go to work, people who actually, care, and so let's stop the facade that we care. Let's stop the facade that we're about community, because a lot of people are not, and so, and again, and I don't want to just shame people, it's like, let's get our shit together, let's regroup, let's build our community back, let's take it from, the control of these, tech fucking oligarchs, let's take it from the control of these city bureaucrats, let's stop asking for permission to do anything.
Yep.
I want to say, I just realized we all have some form of connection to, like, Kenny in the Mission District with the organizing community, Dea with the families, and Angie, former vice president candidate of the Union of San Francisco, former vice president. You were running to be vice president and very heavily involved. Everyone ran to Andy for union representation, and me with my teachers, and I'm being called anti-teacher. Andy's being called anti-union, anti-organizer over there, and anti-worker over there. And there's just all of these attacks, for people who are just, I don't know what happened, but, it's just like, there's so much of this division that has caused, and they're the ones, and we're standing for families, workers, or teachers, and everyone. And here we're being labeled such the opposite. By the way, I just wanted to tell, and I don't know if Jessica wants to add any of this, but you can still get abortions. And if you can't get an abortion, go to Mexico. It's always been the Underground Railroad for everything, for escapees of slaves from the very beginning of time, and for HIV medicine when they didn't approve it, and for vaccine cards if you need one, and for pills for abortion. So Mexico is a place to go if you need to go down south and get anything that you need there. So just contact your local Mexican. So
Jessica, are you going to say something? Because I was going to.
No, I'm not going to say anything on Roe v. Wade because that's going to be another episode. But the hypocrisy is this week.
And I think we need to have another episode, complete episode about that.
Oh my God, yeah. But no, and I feel for you, and I hope you're going to keep fighting in whatever ways you can. And we have 4, I'm not in San Francisco, but 4 out of 5 of us here are, like you're saying, Eduardo, community members. So it just shows, like, even out of this, relatively speaking, small community, like, there are people who are willing to show solidarity and willing to fight, and we might have to keep kind of reinventing the way that we go about that. But I am hopeful, and I think there's more people waking up to sort of just what's been going on in our school systems for a lot longer than COVID, right? And it's in a way, I suppose it's pushing us and kind of forcing us to have to contend with some of that stuff, which, people like Latino students have been dealing with for decades. So yeah, it's not easy, but I hope we're going to get somewhere positive in the end.
Yeah, let's hope that together, I think we can make it. I'm positive that we can make it.
I have to say, I agree with Eduardo when he says that teachers are not going to accept that they've did anything wrong here, and they're going to continue to double down on this direction that they've gone in. But I think it is, I want to say something. If we're going to end, I want to say something about why I think schools are being destroyed. Because we had Allison on last week, and she talked about NAFTA as part of a plan of getting entire Mexico to be part of a big data analytics, social impact investment experiment that was then going to be sent around the world. So destroy Mexican economy so you can make people in Mexico dependent on the Silicon Valley, U.S. Western investor state. And that's what I think is going on here. I think the school system is being systematically destroyed so that essentially, as the World Economic Forum says, we are going to have online or robot teachers by 2027. And they just to read this part of how they see AI, not just AI as cheaper than teachers because they don't ask for pay raises and like that, but they talk about this. They say classrooms could be equipped with language processors, speech and gesture recognition technology, eye tracking, and other physiological sensors to collect and analyze information about each student. Instead of waiting for a test or a raised hand for a student to display her understanding of the material, teachers could access real-time information that could show them why the student might not be learning at full capacity. They'd know which students weren't getting enough sleep, if they had inadequate diets, if they were suffering from emotional distress, information that it can affect the student's performance, but that can be difficult to tease out in the classroom. What they've essentially done is, as they essentially terrify students out of schools, as they get them to flee the schools, the only educational options, well, two things. One is the only educational options that will be provided for these kids are going to be outside this school system that they're trying to get rid of as brick and mortar in the first place. But secondly, the teachers who are remaining, if they're going to be teaching all the kids who are, whatever kids are there, they're going to provide them the AI that's going to be used to, one, monitor what the teacher's doing, and then, as we can see, monitor what all these students are doing, which then only is then the part of that big data analytics, which only builds the bigger AI. So they've, just like NAFTA was the crisis that creates the solution of, collecting data on the entire Mexico and South America, this problem, COVID, and the way the pandemic was handled, was the crisis that could create the solution that allows them to actually do the thing of destroy the brick and mortar schools. Not just last year when we were in remote, but now start the whole process of degrading the whole thing, breaking up any of the relationships that kept it together, and then justifying a system of full surveillance monitoring of the students and the teachers, and in the process creating an AI that replaces us as teachers and replaces student experience of each other or with a teacher with something that is just that, which is just tech. This is to me very much connected to Allison's view of how all of us are going to be treated like the indigenous were. We will all be displaced. We will all be separated. We will all be isolated. And this is the prison vision that they're building for us. And they think they can have these folks online by 2027. And so when I heard Dea's story, and when I saw it reflected in things I was hearing about Mission, and then when I see even what's happening at my existing school, I'm here right now, how they make it so that people are less and less interested in being in these buildings, not just the students, but the teachers themselves, then to me, I can see how they're nudging us into this future.
Yeah, I'm thinking about those, was it like Mexican mothers or young women, and how Allison was saying that, like, how valuable that data, like those populations specifically, is even more pivotal and more valuable to them at this point, because it can help them build that system. And it's like, yeah, the students at this middle school, like, that's the data they want, right? And then what do they get? They get surveilled 10 times harder. They get exploited 10 times harder. It becomes even more of a prison.
Yeah.
My community organizing angle is that, that you have people claiming inequality, right? When it comes to technology, and like barriers to technology as being the problem, realizing that, that's exactly what they want us to do, is to ask for it, as a solution, when in reality it's a prison that we are building ourselves. And, just like indigenous people, like the people that claim to be their friends were the worst enemies, because they were saying, we're here to help you. I think that's where the role of, at least in my view, community organizers have, that, they're the ones pushing the stuff that's good for you, quote unquote.
I agree with that statement, and I think once again, the Everett School was a school that they have choose to have everything in place. I mean, this kind of the pilot program for them to implement all of this, beginning with the the implementation of iPads. I think from Verizon, they had a grant that gave to the Everett students every student an iPad from Verizon. So from the beginning of this, and I thought I saw this at the beginning, and I also sent a letter at the beginning of this saying that I don't want my kid to be using the iPad, and I don't want him to be doing the surveys, because I think they were doing the surveys, all of the warnings that Allison was giving. I was just listening and reading about that, and everything was happening just as she said. So I said from the beginning, I don't want that. I sent a letter. I mean, I don't consent my son to participate in any kind of experiment, nothing, right? No medical, no computer experiments, nothing of that. I don't want him to be answering any surveys, because they were doing all of this. At the beginning, when the behavioral issues were more intense, the kids, because of everything that they were doing to the kids and giving them the computers, I mean, giving them the iPads and forcing them to basically, I guess what they were trying is to moving them to the digital thing, putting the kids on the iPads as a training, right? But what happened with after coming from the pandemic, coming from Zoom, kids didn't want this. And what it was happening is the kids were destroying the iPads. They destroyed the computers, they destroyed the iPads. That was the very first thing where they showed the frustration, and they were destroying the material things, right? Plus, they did have everything is planned. They did have on TikTok, they were telling the kids to beat teachers, to destroy the schools. They were doing that through TikTok, those challenges. So they destroyed the iPads, they destroyed the computers. So in one sense, I was happy, because they were destroying the very first thing they tried to use to have the kids condition it and put them on digital, training to have the digital education. So the kids destroyed that. They don't want that. They said they don't want it. But now it seems for next year, they are planning to have, again, another new batch of computers or iPads for the kids. And that's part of the fight, that we are saying, no, we don't want that. And that's part of the intervention that we want. That's why I have been fighting and advocating for the outdoor learning for the schools, and fighting so hard to have them building the outdoor learning classrooms for Everett, based on the problems that we have, that we need to have the kids outside, and for the mental health and emotional health, that we don't want them in the computers. So that has been part of the fight and part of the advocacy, yes, because we don't want computers. But it's a fight. It's gonna be a fight, and part of this is organizing with the parents and educating the parents about what's going on, and helping them to open the eyes of what's the plan and what's really going on.
Well, that was a very lively discussion. I think that we've gotten a lot from from everyone. Thank you so much, Dea, for participating with us. It's always a pleasure having you on, especially since you are a part of the mission community and you are sharing your experience with us. And thank you for bringing in the insights of what's happening at your child's school, which is also, like I had said in the very beginning, which is a microcosm, which is a reflection of other public schools in the USA. So thank you for that. All right, and you are not anti-worker, by the way, as some people have alleged you are. By the way, Dea.
That's kind of ridiculous. A working mom is against workers.
And you were one of the frontline workers. You were a hero.
Exactly.
We applauded them in the beginning and said,
and now, out.
Exactly.
All right. Well, that does it for this week's episode. What's Left is a weekly political podcast / channel challenging the mainstream left. We post information about our topics and our guests on the episode notes where we found this episode, or on our blog at what-s-left.webnode.com. You can find past episodes to this podcast /channel there and connect with us. I remind folks, if you like anything you have heard here, please support us by subscribing, rate, review, turn on your notifications to any of our platforms on Spotify, iTunes Podcast, Stitcher, Google Play, BitChute, Odyssey, YouTube, Rumble, or Telegram. And you can always find any of that information on our blog and the links to those in the episode notes where we found this episode. And if you would like to give us feedback about something you've heard or suggest something for us to cover, contact us through our blog. I'm Eduardo Barca with co-host Jessica, Kenny Cepeda, and Andy Lipson. Thanks again for joining us, Dheyanira. We'll see each other again some other time. Ciao.
Thank you for inviting me. Yeah.